Some people can talk for hours and still never say what hurts. The words stop right where the truth begins. They can explain the problem, make a joke, ask about your day. But when the moment turns tender, something inside them goes quiet. It is not that they have nothing to say. It is that opening up still feels like standing in a room where no one came. If you were ignored as a child, silence did not feel neutral. It felt instructive, like a lesson your body learned too well. Your feelings could be real and still go unanswered. Your needs could be visible and still somehow not count. So you adapted in the way children always do. You stopped expecting emotional arrival and started editing yourself first. That pattern can look calm in adulthood. It can look private, mature, low maintenance, even impressively self-contained. But underneath it is often a person who still does not trust being emotionally received, not fully and never without cost. They say they do not want to burden people. Sometimes that is true, and sometimes they are scanning for signs. Their honesty will be too much. They watch faces closely. They notice distracted eyes, delayed replies, tiny tone shifts most people miss. Long ago, emotional safety was not about being understood. It was about learning when it was safer to stop talking. Maybe you were the child who came home with a full day inside you. By dinner, you could already feel nobody had room for it. Maybe your sadness was called dramatic. Maybe your excitement was interrupted. Your fear brushed off. Your questions met with exhaustion. Maybe no one was cruel in obvious ways. They were just unavailable in the moments that quietly shape a person. That is what makes this wound hard to explain. You can grow up with food and routines and still feel emotionally unseen. When a child is consistently unseen, they do not just feel lonely. They begin organizing themselves around not being noticed too much. They become easy to handle, careful with volume, careful with emotion, careful with needing anything twice. Then people praise them for being mature. What they often mean is, you learned not to interrupt anybody with your humanity. That is why so many ignored children become adults who are deeply considerate. They read rooms fast and make themselves smaller without being asked. They know how to stay useful. They know how to be pleasant, capable, and emotionally non-disruptive. But ask them what they need, and something fobs over. The answer is not absent, just far away. They may say I'm fine before checking if it is true. They may call themselves independent when they actually feel unreachable. There is often a delay between experience and awareness. They feel the hurt later, in the car, in the shower, at 2 in the morning. In the moment, their system is busy managing everyone else. It learned that connection depends on staying readable, never fully revealed. So opening up does not feel simple. It feels like risk disguised as intimacy. Even with kind people, the old math stays active. If I say this, will they pull away, go blank, get impatient, make me regret it? That is why they often tell the easier version first, the polished version, the funny version, the version least likely to ask for care. They can describe events without naming impact. They can tell you what happened and skip what it did to them. Sometimes they talk most when they feel least exposed. Words become a way to circle the feeling, not enter it. You see it in relationships all the time. They can love deeply and still hide the part that most needs tenderness. They may seem open because they are honest about facts, but emotional truth is a different door, and it still sticks. When someone asks what's wrong, they often hear something older underneath it. Can you be brief, easy, and not ruin the mood? So they shrink the answer. Nothing, I'm just tired, it's not a big deal, don't worry about me. That last line says more than it seems. Don't worry about me usually means I learned what happened when people had to. Maybe worry came with annoyance. Maybe help came late, distracted, or wrapped in guilt. So now even kindness can feel confusing. They want it, but they brace against it at the same time. Someone offers support, and their first instinct is refusal. Not because they do not need it, but because receiving still feels exposing. To receive care, you have to let someone see the place where care is needed. That is exactly the place they learned to hide. This is why they apologize for normal needs. Sorry for venting, sorry for asking, sorry for taking up space. The apology comes before the sentence is finished. Shame got there first. And shame here rarely looks loud. It looks polite, functional, and strangely grateful for crumbs. They feel bad for having limits. They feel guilty resting when no one is upset with them. Even relief can make them uneasy. If the room is finally peaceful, part of them waits for the emotional bill. Being ignored teaches a child something brutal and quiet. Your inner world matters least when other people are uncomfortable. So adulthood becomes a long habit of emotional postponement. I'll say it later. Need less, ask smaller, handle it myself. Then one day, they are the dependable one in every room. Everyone trusts them, but almost nobody knows them. They are the person friends call during crises. They are the one at work who stays steady when everything is falling apart. People admire how composed they are. Few notice how exhausting it is to be loved mostly for your regulation. That is the hidden cost of being easy to rely on. You can become valuable everywhere and still feel untouched where it matters. Sometimes the body starts speaking when the person cannot. Tight chest, heavy fatigue, jaw pain, random tears with no clear story. It is not random at all. Feelings do not disappear when they are unwelcome. They go underground. And what goes underground often returns as tension, or numbness, or a strange emptiness after being strong for too long. That emptiness can be hard to name. It is not exactly sadness and not exactly burnout. It feels more like living far from yourself, like you became highly skilled at functioning and lost the address of your own interior life. So when someone loving says, "Just tell me what you feel," you may land like pressure, not because the question is wrong. The pathway was never built in a safe enough environment. You cannot easily access what you had to mute to stay connected. Some people think opening up is a confidence problem. Sometimes it is actually memory stored in the nervous system. The body remembers what happened when you reached outward. Blank faces, deflections, irritation, emotional absence. So even now, honesty can trigger caution before the mind has a reason. The threat is old, but the body still treats it as current. This is why they freeze when asked a direct emotional question. How are you really can feel strangely hard to answer. Not because nothing is there, because too much is there and none of it learned how to come out cleanly. They may need hours to know whether they were hurt. They may need distance before the feeling becomes language. That delay is not dishonesty. It is what happens when self-awareness had to develop around suppression. Children who are emotionally met learn a simple rhythm. I feel something. I show it. Someone helps me make sense of it. Ignored children often learn a different rhythm. I feel something. I hide it. I handle it alone. I call that strength. And for a while it is strength. It gets you through rooms that had no space for your softness. But survival skills have expiration dates. What protected you at 10 can isolate you at 30. This is where the confusion begins. The trait people praise is often the same trait causing loneliness. Being unneedy gets applause. Being unreadable gets mistaken for stability. But real closeness does not happen through perfect self-management. It happens where truth is allowed to arrive unfinished. That is terrifying for someone who learned unfinished feelings get ignored, or corrected, or treated like inconvenience. So they rehearse before opening up. They edit their sentences in real time. They try to sound reasonable enough to deserve care. They turn pain into something efficient, almost easy to receive. Even then, they may feel embarrassed afterward. A simple, vulnerable moment can leave them replaying every word for hours. Did I say too much? Did I make it awkward? Do they see me differently now? That spiral is not vanity. It is old exposure fear wearing adult language. Part of them still believes being known creates debt. If someone comforts me, I owe them lightness tomorrow. So they rush to recover. They joke, change the subject, offer help back too quickly. They try to erase the evidence that they needed anyone. The tenderness barely lands before they manage it away. You can see this in romantic relationships especially. They crave emotional safety, then tense up the moment it starts to feel real. They may pull away after a deeply connecting night. They may get quiet after being cared for, not because it meant nothing. It meant too much. And when something means too much, old fear wakes up beside it. The same thing happens with boundaries. They know they need them, but setting one can feel almost physically wrong. They say no and then feel guilty for hours. Childhood trained them to equate peace with compliance. If being easy kept relationships stable, then self-expression can still feel dangerous, even when the other person is safe. This is why some adults look calm while living in constant self-abandonment. There is no visible crisis, just a lifetime of quiet override. They notice everyone else's discomfort before their own. They can sense a room instantly and miss themselves completely. Sometimes they even feel proud of that. It feels like empathy, responsibility, emotional intelligence. Part of it is, but part of it is hypervigilance taught by inconsistency. Real empathy includes yourself in the room. Hypervigilance forgets you and calls that virtue. That difference matters. One builds connection, the other quietly empties you out. And none of this means your childhood had to look dramatic. A child can be emotionally neglected in a very normal-looking house. No big scenes, just 1,000 small moments where their inner life met no real landing place. A parent always tired. A parent who solved practical problems but not emotional ones. A family where feelings were mocked, rushed, or treated as mess. A home where being low maintenance became your safest role. Children do not need perfection to feel secure. They need enough emotional response to believe their inner world matters. Without that, they often become adults who can perform life beautifully, but struggle to inhabit it from the inside. They achieve, organize, show up, carry, adapt, then privately wonder why love still feels difficult to trust. Trust is not just believing someone is nice. It is believing your full self will not disappear in their presence. That belief has to live in the body, not just the mind. And the body learns slowly, which means this pattern does not change through pressure. It changes through repeated experiences of being met without punishment. Not dramatic breakthroughs, often small moments that would look ordinary from the outside. Someone asks twice and still sounds warm. Someone listens without fixing you. Someone notices your hesitation and does not take it personally. Someone stays kind after you say something inconvenient. This is how the nervous system updates, not through force, but through contrast. Little by little, the old prediction weakens. Maybe my feelings do not always end in distance. Maybe I do not have to become smaller to stay loved. Maybe being understood is not a rare exception. But before that change feels natural, there is usually grief. A quiet adult grief for how early you learned to disappear. Grief for the child who became reasonable too soon. Grief for all the times you translated pain into silence. Grief for being called strong when you were mostly alone. Grief for how much personality was built around absence. That grief matters. Without it, people romanticize the adaptation that wounded them. They call it independence when it was isolation. They call it maturity when it was self-erasure with good manners. The truth is more honest and more compassionate. You were adaptive, and it cost you. You became skilled in rooms that did not know how to hold you. That skill deserves respect, but not lifelong control. You do not have to hate the version of you that learned to hide. That version was trying to keep connection alive with the tools it had. But you also do not have to keep living by childhood rules. Not every relationship requires disappearance anymore. Not every silence is safety. Not every need is too much. Sometimes opening up begins in very unglamorous ways. Saying I'm actually hurt instead of I'm just tired. Saying I don't know what I feel yet, but something is there. Saying I need a minute without apologizing for it. For people like this, those moments are not small. They are acts of revision. They teach the self something new. My inner world can exist in the open a little longer. And yes, some people still will not know what to do with it. That part is real. But their limitation is not proof your feelings were a mistake. It is just proof they do not have the room. That difference matters. Ignored children often blame themselves for other people's emotional limits. They think maybe I asked wrong, felt wrong, needed wrong. Usually they just reach toward someone who could not receive them. Once you see that clearly, something begins to loosen. Rejection stops meaning your interior life is invalid. It still hurts, but it hurts cleaner, without the old layer of self-erasure on top. And that is where real change starts. Not in becoming fearless, but in becoming less willing to abandon yourself first. Maybe you still pause before saying what matters. Maybe your throat still tightens when kindness gets too close. Maybe you still need time to find your feelings after the moment has passed. That does not mean you were broken. It means your honesty was shaped in a place where honesty did not feel safe. Of course, it comes out carefully. The goal is not to become instantly open. The goal is to stop confusing self-protection with your true personality. You are not only the quiet one, not only the strong one, and not only the easy one. There is a deeper self under the adaptation. One with needs, reactions, preferences, tenderness, and a voice that did not get enough use. That self is not immature for wanting response. It is human. And maybe that is the deepest wound of being ignored. You start treating your humanity like something to manage. You become thoughtful about everybody else's emotions and suspicious of your own. You learn restraint before you learn trust. So if opening up still feels hard, that difficulty makes sense. It came from somewhere. It came from years of learning that being felt was not the same as being met. That is a hard lesson to outgrow quickly. But it is not the final lesson. Not if you keep noticing the difference between old fear and present reality. Not if you let safe people stay long enough to prove they can handle your truth. Not if you stop apologizing for every honest sentence. Slowly, the silence inside begins to change. It stops being a hiding place and becomes a space where you can hear yourself. Then opening up no longer feels like performing need perfectly. It feels more like letting reality be shared. Maybe that is what healing looks like here. Not becoming louder, just becoming less absent from your own life. Less edited, less pre-explained, less gone before the conversation even begins. Because the child in you did not stay quiet for no reason. They stayed quiet because no one truly came close enough. And the adult in you is not weak for struggling now. They are carrying a pattern built in loneliness. So if you have spent years being the one who listens, helps, adjusts, and holds it together, this matters. Your silence was intelligent, not natural. It was learned, and what was learned in neglect can be softened in connection. You were never hard to love. You were hard to hear in a world that kept teaching you not to speak.